This is Maomao. In episode 1 of the Apothecary Diaries, she notices that her workplace, the Rear Palace, it works a lot like a brothel. But later, the mysteries inside the Rear Palace reveal what the inner court actually is. A casino. A government-run slot machine. And I can prove it. I'm Lucy, a certified coach with a formal degree in psychology and behavioral science, and I am unfortunately qualified to talk about this because I play gacha games. So today, we're going to dig into how the inner court actually works, how it affects its players, the concubines, and why the inner court is actually worse than a casino. Some people might think this is some crazy bait, but this is the Apothecary Diaries we're talking about. This is a series that can include chest size in its lore and somehow make it work as a serious conversation. So when the inner court, a place full of dark history, turns out to run on gambling principles, for the series standard, that's barely a stretch. And Mama already had an inkling of it from the very beginning in episode 1. So after 3 months working as a laundry girl in the inner court, she came to a disappointing conclusion. This place sucks! Here's what she says.
御殿も花街も大して変わらないな。そんな下女でもごく稀に下級妃になることがある。要は、見た目だ。
So, Mama doesn't really elaborate on why she thinks that, but at face value, it's pretty obvious why. Both are places where beauty, performance, and transactions around them reign supreme. But what she misses is the fact that both the inner court and the Ferdegris house work using a model similar to casinos. They even produce the same type of victim. If we compare how the inner court works and how a slot machine works, the difference they have is only separated by one word. Let's talk about both, a slot machine and the inner court. To use a simple slot machine, you insert a coin, you pull the lever, and then you either win or you lose. The psychological concept they leverage to keep you spending your coins is called intermittent reinforcement. The idea is really simple. They want you to keep trying, so they let you win. But not always. They don't have to reward you on every pull. Maybe once every 50 pulls, maybe once every 25. It's random. But with only just that, it's enough to keep you hooked. What, you think you need to win every single time to get hooked? No, the losses also count. In psychology, this is usually called a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement. Keep that in mind. Now, if we look at the inner court, they also use intermittent reinforcement. The players, the one pulling the lever, are the concubines. The reward is the emperor's visit.
Yeah, boy.
You know what I mean. Mama calls it hanky-panky for some reason, but the difference is basically this. When the emperor visits these concubines, it doesn't have much to do with how many times each concubine does something. They don't have a lever to pull. It's mostly about time. It's a waiting game. If a concubine does well, plays by the rules, keeps herself visit ready, then the emperor might visit her. When he can. It's also kind of random. For example, in the early part of the series, the emperor visits Gyokuyou often. But because of Maomao, there's one period that the emperor is crazy about Lihua. So with slot machines, we're talking about variable ratio reinforcement. But in the inner courts, it's closer to a variable interval system. An uncertain rewarding system built on random timing. See? One word. But what's the purpose of this? So, just like with slot machines, the system wants the players to keep doing something. In a slot machine, it wants them to keep spending coins and pulling the lever. But in the inner court, it's about making these concubines stay visit ready. Concubines in the Apothecary Diaries, they're not about love. It's not only about lust either. In some cases, this is about keeping factions in check. Some of them are basically glorified hostages, which means when they're taking care of themselves, following the rules, and don't flirt with the manager, they mean less problems. So to make sure everyone behaves, every concubine in the inner court is gambling with whatever they have. Which means the imperial family has successfully made a group of high-maintenance ladies take care of themselves by doing less. The house always wins. And now, if we look at the Ferdegris house, this is exactly what they want from their customers too. And the anime actually shows the same pattern through Lihaku and Pairin. So in episode 8, Lihaku goes to the Ferdegris house, he spends the night with Pairin, and is hooked. But later in episode 14, we learn that Lihaku is serious about Pairin. So he comes back again and again to the Frederick's house. He doesn't always have the money to hire Pairin, but he still comes there. He spends time with the servant girls, does this and that, while yearning for Pairin. And in the novel, the madam actually leveraged this. Sometimes she gives Lihaku a discount, but not always, so sometimes Lihaku can only earn. Now, you know the drill. Can you imagine how hooked Lihaku is on Pairin and the Frederick's house now? Because that's how you create a long-lasting customer. Pairin is one of the best courtesans. Her time is super expensive. The madam can't expect someone to just come every 2 days, pay full price every time. But what the madam can do is to manage her courtesans' availability. And it's far more than just a simple scarcity concept. It's fine for them to be scarce. It's fine for them to play a little hard to get. They're expensive anyway, right? As long as they can create a wealthy customer who is so hooked that he keeps coming back to the establishment for 10 to 12 years, mission accomplished. Our brain is funny sometimes. For the Frederick's house, it might even be psychologically more optimal to do it like this. It can keep clients hooked for longer, more than always giving them the best service every single time. So yeah, in episode 1, Maomao's comparison is on point. But it might be much deeper than she realizes. The Frederick's house and the inner court are in different businesses. One sells access to courtesans, the other organizes access to the emperor. But emotionally, they run on the same cursed engine. Also, I need to stress that intermittent reinforcement doesn't always mean bad. Again, just like many tools in this world, it can be used for good things, or it can be used to create gacha games. But when you use it in a place like the inner court, that's when problems continuously arise. What, you think this gambling-ish system in the inner court with a reward that can turn your life 180 degrees, they don't create unnecessary bad vibes? It can turn even the most reasonable people into animals. Of course it does. We even met one of its victims in the first episode, Lady Lihua. The inner court has been labeled dysfunctional multiple times by Maomao. It just doesn't produce enough heirs for its size. 2,000 women. Of course, not all of them are concubines, but yet it's either no prince or dead prince. Someone's lacking up. But the inner court does succeed at one thing: making concubines act like gambling addicts. And you'll see how this relates to Lihua. So, in episode 4 of the Apothecary Diaries, Maomao is sent by the emperor to do an emergency healing session for one of his concubines, Lady Lihua. Episode 4 is such a memorable episode because of the slap. But we're not here for that. We're here for Lady Lihua, because her reaction to her condition is strange, to say the least. The main culprit behind her sickness is that her clueless ladies-in-waiting used a banned cosmetic on her. These mean ladies smuggled it in, kept using it on their mistress, and then Lihua fell seriously ill. And then they got what they deserved. But that's not Lihua's entire story. Before all that farce, Lihua had just lost her only son, who was also an imperial prince. As a mother and as a consort, she was crushed. So that's why when she gradually regains her strength, she asked Maomao a rather sad question. But then her concern gets more specific.
帝の寵愛はついえたのに、忠告の言葉も聞かず、みすみす我が子を殺した女が玉葉妃に勝てるのかしら。
Now, I get it. She's a high-ranking consort. She comes from a noble background. But lady, have you seen the mirror? Every living being that sees you says, would. And also, lady, you nearly died. I think we should talk about that first. But now, knowing how the inner court works sheds some light on what happened there. Because the question is this: what happens when these concubines, especially the ones the emperor has visited before, suddenly stop getting their rewards? They just keep losing their gamble, no matter what they do. And now, suddenly, what Lihua asks Maomao has a different depth to it. Of course, I'm not saying that Lihua is a gambling addict or something, because Lihua's case is way, way worse than that. She lost her child. She nearly died of poisoning. It is more than reasonable for her to feel like everything is slowly crumbling to the ground. But also adding to that, there's that anxiety beyond her feelings as a mother. What's next for me? And that feeling, in this kind of environment, is not exclusive to Lihua. Have you seen the women in the inner court? The anime keeps throwing nasty scenes at us about them. Because when the reward is as juicy as the possibility of becoming empress and you are being robbed of that reward while you can't leave, that is an entire catalog of reasons to crash out. That's why Lihua's case in episode 4 is when the system becomes impossible to ignore. She was frequently visited by the emperor, and then she had to face the possibility that it could all go away. But luckily Maomao gives some nighttime advice, and the emperor is like, wood. So she can't escape the casino yet. The house wins once again. Which says a lot about the system. Why concubines are placed in the inner court is one thing, but by extension of that, not every concubine wants to gamble. Some just don't care. They don't even want to compete. But this is when it gets really concerning, because now it's time to reveal why the inner court is worse than a casino. The inner court houses plenty of concubines, but not all of them are there to gamble their lives. There are cases like Lady Lihua, who literally doesn't want to have anything to do with this shit. We have Aduo, who if you ask her why she is even there, it's like, emotional support? But they still get screwed anyway. So I want to take a look at 3 concubines with very different positions in this system. One is backed by a cheater, one actually understands the game, and one is the biggest proof that not playing doesn't save you. And each of them reveals how much more problematic the inner court is, even when you compare it to a normal casino. First, let's talk about the cheater, Loulan. One of the things that makes the inner court casino worse is that the players can bend the rules even before the game even starts. In this huge casino, the players, they have sponsors. When we're talking about Loulan, honestly, when we're talking about anyone in this series, we have to talk about the people behind these people. In case of Loulan, of course, Shisho, the Shi clan. And suddenly, the game is not fair, because it's not. It was never fair in the first place. She comes from a clan powerful enough to pressure the court because Shisho was the previous Empress Dowager's favorite. Which means Loulan doesn't enter the game like a normal player. She enters like a casino whale with investors, political leverage, and a customer service threat. And that's basically what happens in the anime. Loulan arrives in the inner court with a bang. She brings an entire bus of servants, all covered up in makeup. It's a display of intimidation toward the other consorts, but also towards the house. Even Shisho is there, looking at everyone like this. That face, that's not saying, please treat my daughter kindly. That face is saying, you know what happens if you don't. And because the emperor is just one guy, and this isn't a Naruto doujinshi, giving Loulan more reward means less reward for other concubines, especially the middle rank ones. For them, the interval between the emperor's visit can suddenly just get twice as longer as usual. All because one sponsored player walked into the room and changed the odds. But honestly, the funniest part is that Loulan herself doesn't even care about the normal reward. She's an entire encyclopedia of agendas. She was actively making sure she didn't get pregnant. She looks at the house and goes, "F you!" So yeah, that's Loulan. But on the other side, some concubines can't really rely on pressuring the court, but they can still play better than others. What if you're just a goated baddie? You understand what's happening, you know how the game works, and more importantly, you know what steps you need to take better than almost every other concubine. Well, that's just Gyokuyou. You probably already noticed just how much more careful Gyokuyou is compared to other consorts. She has her own personal reasons for it, but it helps a lot in the inner court. The gambling system of the inner court already produces all the bad vibes you could ask for. But then you add faction pressure, jealous rivals, spies, malicious gossip, servants who may or may not be loyal. And suddenly being favored by the emperor doesn't make you safe. It makes you really fixable. Gyokuyou seems to understand what that actually brings. And the anime we see how ugly this can get. Some concubines are willing to trample their competitors. Gyokuyou was poisoned when she was pregnant. Lihua was betrayed by her own head lady in waiting. Aduo's servant nearly poisoned the child without Aduo even knowing. So even though Gyokuyou's faction is not as powerful as Loulan Shi clan, in the capital at least, she realizes that there are steps she needs to take and can take just to stay in the game. She closes the most dangerous hole first, untrustworthy people. And it has a lot to do with her nature. She has difficulty in trusting in the first place. She has the fewest ladies in waiting compared to the other high-ranking consorts, but she doesn't even hire one from the capital. But also, aside from that, she's also not the type to do mean girl things, you know? She doesn't go around slapping other concubines in the face. She shows a more compassionate side of herself in public. She plays carefully, because she knows her competitors can be crazy. And the last concubine is literally the opposite of Gyokuyou. It's Lishu, okay? It's Lishu. She doesn't even want to be in the game. She is totally inequipped to face all the danger. Her backing is lackluster at best. Honestly, most of the time it feels non-existent. She even arrives in the inner court with a social white debuff. Yeah, of course it's Lishu. If there is something cursed about the Apothecary Diaries, chances are 90% of the time it somehow involves Lishu. And the sad part is, like Lady Fuyo, Lishu doesn't even care about the reward. That's illegal. In the first place, she is in the inner court out of pity. The emperor tries to protect her because he knows her family would use her anyway, so he steps in. But then look at the result. Her own servants even antagonize her, and she still has to exist inside the same toxic political ecosystem as everyone else. Except unlike Gyokuyou, she does not understand the game. Unlike Loulan, she does not have overwhelming backing. She's just not equipped enough to be in her position. I know it, you know it, Maomao knows it, heck, even Lishu herself knows. She's just there. But Lishu can't just walk away. She is a high-ranking consort. Living without permission is a capital offense, which means she is not allowed to leave. She does not get any reward whatsoever, she does not want the reward whatsoever, but she still gets punished by the environment the reward creates. Sounds like a really awful casino. The game can be rigged against you by other players. The system creates toxic personality like a factory, and you still gets duped by others, even when you don't compete. When you create an environment like that, can we even say the house wins? Well, yeah, you still can, because the house winning doesn't mean the palace is healthy. It just means the machine keeps running.